Hi, everyone. Welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and my guest today is Ron Svec. Ron is a veterinarian. He worked at the Vermont, New Hampshire Veterinary Clinic in Dummerston for 37 years, retiring just at the end of 2020, which was just a few months ago. For 10 years, he served as a vet for the annual Iditarod Sled Dog Race in Alaska, an amazing event, which he's going to give us some details about. He was also for many years the Brattleboro youth soccer coach, and also he's the girls varsity soccer team coach at BUHS. So welcome today, Ron. It is great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Wendy. Hi.
We have a lot of ground to cover. So you've done so many interesting things, and you have so many great stories about wildlife of all kind. You're born in New Jersey.
Indeed.
Yes. And did you have siblings?
I did. Two brothers, two older brothers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything back in those days that inspired you to get involved with animals and be a vet?
It was kind of on my own type thing. My parents didn't have, and nor did my brothers have much of an interest in animals other than superficially. I had this intense curiosity about creatures and such. And not just pets, but all the wild creatures. And I grew up in a suburban neighborhood of New Jersey, which I fortunately was surrounded by woods and two rivers where they met. And it was very easily accessible to me. And to me, that was a huge part of me growing up. Just the rivers and the marshes and the ponds and the woods really helped to shape my interest in wildlife and wild creatures and such, and offered me many opportunities to take care of many things. I became kind of known in the neighborhood that I would take, orphan birds and injured creatures and care for them, to release them and this type of thing. So, yeah.
Oh, you had it in you really early.
Very early. I mean, I have it on my, maybe fourth grade project where I was writing about myself. What do you want to do when you grow up? And I said I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I have it in writing someplace where my mother saved that little thing that I wrote up.
You actually ended up going to school to veterinary medicine, to study veterinary medicine.
Yes, at Kansas State University.
So how'd you get from New Jersey to Kansas State?
Well, they were one of the few schools. New Jersey did not have a veterinary school in the state. I had this inkling to want to go out west a little bit and experience a little bit different than the East Coast. Mm. So I went out there and got my bachelor's degree. I didn't have very good grades through high school, and my guidance counselor actually tried to dissuade me for pursuing that and think of other things that I might be interested in, like wildlife conservation, which I had listed. But I went to the Bergen Community College, got my grades up, became a more serious student, learned how to study better, and then went to Kansas State University, got my bachelor's degree there. Didn't get in for 1 year, went to University of Penn State University as a special student, and then got in, and then went to Kansas State.
You did some interesting externing after you graduated from there.
I did. Well, 1 year, because we were partially required, but very much encouraged to do things on our, on between years of veterinary school. And 1 year I went and I worked at the Meadowlands, which is with the standard breds, with a veterinarian who worked as one of the veterinarians who visited the track there and then other tracks in the area. So I worked with equine for 1 year. And then I think the next thing I did was the year after that was some broodmare work in New York State at some pretty high-end broodmare facilities, breeding for race horses and such. So I was invited to go home for the weekend with a friend. This is when I was at Kansas State, and this would be before vet school actually. And he said, hey, you want to come home with me for the weekend? We're actually doing a rodeo, and where I'm helping at it, and maybe you would be interested in helping. I'm like, sure, whatever. And so I had never been to a rodeo, no less helped with one. So the next thing I know, I'm there I'm the guy with the rope on the gate, opening up the bucking bronchos that are leaping out of the gate with the rider on the back, and with this, this horse trying to throw the rider off. And I'm like, this is, this New Jersey kid suddenly finding himself in the middle of a rodeo.
That's going into the belly of the beast, literally, right?
Absolutely.
That's really something.
Great experience. So I love being out in the Midwest, and it's just different. It's just different, just like any place else that you live. It's very agricultural, and I really liked. People mentioned about, Kansas, kind of flat and everything. There's a lot of beautiful places in that state. The Flint Hills, which is where the university is.
At some point, you end up in Vermont. How did that happen?
Yes. My brother he had moved to Vermont, and he was building a house in Cavendish, or beginning to build a house. And I wanted to be a part of that. So I arranged to do an externship between my junior and senior year in this area that we live in now. And it was a certain radius around Cavendish. And the Vermont New Hampshire Veterinary Clinic was looking for someone to come in as a possible addition to the veterinary staff, since Dr. Baldwin was retiring. So they got my letter, of which was one of about 50 that I sent out, and they said, "Come on over and work for us for the summer." So I did partly at the equine practice in New York, and then the second half of the summer I came and worked for them.
And then you fell in love with the area, right?
I did. Well, I really fell in love with the families that I was associated with Clyde Johnson and his family, and Ron Venema and his family. Right. So it's very welcoming. It's actually a little bit different too, because the other practices that I worked in was pretty intense, and not a lot of family life was evident, and they worked strange hours all the time, and kind of workaholics a little bit, like, well, I'm not sure about that aspect of the job. But when I came here, that was a different situation.
Yeah. And when you started at Vermont, New Hampshire Vet Clinic, was it mostly domestic animals, or were you doing large animals as well?
Oh, I was doing both. I was doing the James Herriot thing. So I was doing both large and small. During the course of any day, I would be out on calls, and I would have some appointments or surgeries in the clinic, and then maybe go back out on calls again. So Clyde Johnson was primary large animal, and Ron Venema was really small animal mostly. The three of us shared equine emergency duties and large animal emergency duties. But for general practice, I did half large and half small.
One of the things that you mentioned that kind of perhaps cemented your being here in Dummerston, Vermont, is meeting your lovely wife-to-be, Priscilla. Yes.
Well, I was intending to be, when I was going to graduate, I had intentions of applying to places out in Colorado, in Wyoming, Montana. That was my intention. And then these folks offered me, Clyde and Ron offered me a position when I graduated. So I thought, well, I really like these guys, and I really like this practice, and I like this area. It wasn't my intention to stay here, although my family was back east. My parents still lived in New Jersey. My brother was in Vermont. So my other brother was down in New Jersey. So I had to think long and hard about that. And I finally did make the decision to come and join him. Clyde invited me to his church, Center Church in town, and I would go there, and it was a really nice place to be, and nice people there. And then some of the ladies there knew that I was single and available, and Priscilla Blodgett was available too, although she had a boyfriend nearby, and I was not in the middle of a relationship. but they introduced us to each other via doing some greeting before a service
Uh-huh.
on Monday. And so
Yeah.
we met each other. And it wasn't immediate, but it evolved. And
Yes. Yeah. And this is also for many people who do know Priscilla. She is an extraordinary physical therapist in Putney and craniosacral. Yeah. Yeah. She's a wonderful practitioner. Um, one of the other things I think that's so interesting, Ron, is that over the years, I don't know when you started, but you've done a lot of wildlife rehabilitation work.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, like that started when I was a kid. I had in my backyard in this suburban neighborhood, I had all kinds of cages and facilities and nesting boxes and all of this kind of thing, that where I would take in injured animals and such and try to release them and such.
Yeah.
So I had a real keen interest in wildlife back then, and it evolved. And then as I went on into vet school, we did have a raptor rehabilitation program there.
Mm-hmm.
And I and some other students started actually an aviary at the school.
You've worked with some great people in the area too with wildlife rehabilitation, including the Vermont Wildlife Organization. Is that right?
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Well, there's so many. I mean, there's, Fred Homer, which I know you've interviewed and had on a show, is a very dear friend of mine. And we know each other because he and his wife, Debbie is good friends with Priscilla. So I met Fred through that relationship, and Fred and I have become very, very good friends through the years, and actually, have done he's so helpful to that situation because I do the primary care evaluation in most instances, and then Fred does the rehab care and the long-term care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a great relationship.
Wonderful relationship, yes, and he has a nice big barn where they can rehabilitate. And he's built all kinds of perches and everything. Yeah.
Yes, and we've had a lot of adventures and a lot of fun with that through the years.
Yes, and Patty Smith as well. You've worked with.
Yeah, Patty works with mostly with small mammals and such, and opossums and beavers and such. And I've had a blast helping her with situations with that. She does a great job over it through Bonneville Environmental Education Center.
Yes.
And it's been fun having that relationship. Kelly Price, I want to add too. He's the local game warden. He's really into finding things for me to fix, so he's brought me many, many, many wild creatures that he's helped to capture that were injured to bring for my care.
Yeah. And, this wonderful work that you've been doing, I know that as part of your retirement, you're not going to be doing that kind of thing so much these days. Is that right?
Well, because I'm not at the clinic, it's going to be difficult.
Right.
I will say, my right-hand person, Bonnie Gilson, who has worked at the clinic almost as long as I have, she has been an amazing help with all of my wildlife work. She knows what I need to do. She's assisted me with surgeries and treatments and handling and x-rays, and she can even do certain things when I'm not there, so
you've got a good team there.
Yeah. That's really good. Yes. That's that little group there of those people is a little network that we've formed, and
it's what a family. Yeah. It's really wonderful, Ron. Yeah. And, the different things that you've done, so much of them revolve around teamwork. So let's talk about the Iditarod. Speaking of teams.
Yeah. What a great experience. I had come up with the idea. Oh, I know why. Because my daughter's third grade teacher always did a unit every year with her class at Dummerston School. And my daughter became involved with that and very interested, my oldest daughter, Hannah. And she would say, "Hey, Dad, come here, check this out. Let's see how my musher's doing. And look, and, let me tell you about this." And so she introduced me more to the Iditarod than anybody.
Interesting.
Yes. And so I thought, gee, this is pretty cool. It's great. And so I started learning about it. And then I knew that a a fellow practitioner who lives in Keene, Lee Pearson, who was a year ahead of me at Kansas State.
Oh,
He had done it. So I called Lee and I asked him about it. He says, oh yeah, it's great. It's a lot of work, but you can check it out. Here's the contact. So I did. And I became involved, and I did it, for many years. Not every year in a row necessarily, but for many years, the years that I could.
I was looking up, did a little research on the Iditarod, because I think a lot of people like me have heard about it, but didn't really know what it was. But there was this wonderful thing written about it that you're traveling deep into the interior of the Alaskan wilderness, the most harrowing terrain Mother Nature has to offer, and what is often referred to as America's final frontier. So mushers and their dogs travel through mountains, frozen tundra, thickness, and windy coastline from Anchorage to Nome, Alaska. This is a grueling trail you're taking part in. 1,100 miles, 16 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what it was like?
It's a great adventure. It combines so many things that I enjoy doing. First off, the dogs are amazing. They are just wonderful athletes. They're beautiful dogs. Occasionally, some are Siberian Huskies, but most of them are Alaskan Huskies. So they're a breed of their own through different kinds of breeding techniques. And so they have, the hair coat and the feet and everything, and the endurance and the body type to be doing an endurance sled dog race. Heavy dogs would not be able to do this because they're just not built for it. This is a marathon.
Yeah.
But they love to run, and they are beautiful when they run. They are absolutely gorgeous. I've been impressed through the years. When we were being trained to do this, they were not mentioning as that I was going to be examining each dog at each checkpoint, and nobody had mentioned anything about assistance yet, any kind of a helper. And I said, geez, how's this going to work? But they're so good about being handled that I don't need a helper in most instances. They're just great. And so I would do a complete thorough examination of each dog if they stopped at a checkpoint. So it's great.
It sounds really exciting. It also does sound like it's a real lot of work that you're doing.
It's a lot of work because of the hours, all hours of the night, and some hours, 24 hours in a row when the teams are coming through a checkpoint, but it's exciting, the Alaskan wilderness, meeting Native Alaskan people at the different villages that we're at, whether you're in interior, which is Athabascan, or if you're on the coast, which is Inuit or Eskimo. I was there for a little over 2 weeks each time. And you get flown around because there's no roads out there. You got to get flown, and they have their own little Iditarod Air Force, if you will, of private pilots who fly you from place to place.
What an adventure. What an amazing adventure to be on.
It was a great adventure. I enjoyed it tremendously.
And so I'm not sure if it was when your girls were in school, but you started coaching soccer at Dummerston Elementary.
Yes. But when Hannah was in 7th grade, so I have 2 daughters, Hannah and then Tori, who's 4 years younger than she. When Hannah was in 7th grade, their coach suddenly decided that she couldn't coach that season. And so it was the week before school, and they didn't have a coach. And I had thought about it. I played in high school and I played some in college, and I was just anxious to get back into it. So I went to check it out, what they required of that. And I thought, I don't think I can do this, not with my job as a veterinarian. At that point, it was just the 3 of us, the 3 veterinarians. And I didn't know how that was going to work. But my wife encouraged me, Priscilla encouraged me to say, just see if your partners can find a way for you to do this. And so they were very, encouraging for me to do it. And I got into it where I would, leave at 2, go home, eat lunch, change, be out on the field at 3 till 5, and coach the girls at middle school Dummerston. And I did that for 13 years. And I went up to the high school and 3 years at junior varsity, then last year at varsity level.
And I know that you loved coaching. You did mention that you
love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Could you talk about that a little bit? What is it about coaching that really compelled you?
When I first got into it, I was thinking, well, I just love the game.
Mm.
And I love, I want to get back into playing, and I want to get back into, the excitement of the game and everything. And I suddenly found myself, being that it became where I'm more of a teacher and a mentor
Yeah.
to the girls, many of which had no soccer experience whatsoever. But what I really found that I was working with is that I'm developing like I said, I started at middle school. I'm developing in these young ladies, and I say ladies, they come to me as little girls, as sixth graders, and then they leave as young ladies, as ninth graders, as eighth graders, I mean, that, I'm helping to develop athleticism, helping develop, soccer skills, certainly, obviously, and a love and a knowledge of the game and a passion for the game, but also self-esteem, self-confidence, social skills, teamwork skills, communication skills. It was like way more than I thought, but I loved the fact that that's what it was. And it became even more inviting to me to continue on with that. I just thought it was great. So I kind of made it my second career, if you will. I started getting certificates in it and going to, meetings and conventions and this type of thing, just like I do for veterinary medicine with continuing education.
Yeah.
And I've just loved it.
You created a league as well, I believe.
Well, I created, because there is no Southern Vermont league per se. So I was coaching these girls. They wanted to play off season. There was nothing much available. Brattleboro Youth Soccer, of which I'm a part of, had discontinued the Pioneer Valley League down in Massachusetts, so there was nothing available. That has changed, now, but there was still nothing for U14 girls in the area, and that's what I wanted to do, 14 and under. And so I created kind of a made-up league of our own with towns like Manchester, Rutland, Woodstock, Keene, getting friendly games together and having a season during the spring.
That's wonderful. That's great. That's great. So it was proximity was a big part of that league.
Oh, yeah.
And, instead of traveling.
And developing girls who are really interested in developing their skills. You can't just do it during the fall season in school. They have to have opportunities to play off season, just like any other sport, if you really, really want to get better at it.
Yeah. And you've also done a lot of bicycling and paddling and fishing. So you're an outdoorsman.
I love that kind of stuff. Yes.
Now you'll have time to do more.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to kayaking. I like to kayak and rivers and ponds and marshes, wetlands, this type of thing. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Wildlife.
Yes, absolutely.
Lots of wildlife.
I love having the binocs in hand and this type of thing.
So, Ron, speaking of your team and your kind of everything you've done as a veterinarian, your wildlife rehabilitation and everything, you have a wonderful, wonderful story.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I was doing appointments one morning, and Kelly Price would just show up, the game warden, with various birds that he would find that were injured, And I go out to get my next dog patient, and I see Kelly standing there, and he's kind of looking a little bedraggled, his uniform's wet. Of course, he's got his full uniform on and everything. And he's got this big, huge box, and he says to me, wait till you see what I got you this time. So I said, oh, okay. So I quickly, go through finish up with my last appointment. And I tell Kelly, come on, bring it in. Let's see what you got here. And it's this huge box. And I open up this huge box, and inside there is a bald eagle. And I look at it, and of course it's flat against the bottom of the box, and it's not moving. And I said, geez, what's the story? And somebody had brought his attention to it, that it was on the river and it was not moving. He went to go get it with his kayak. It went into the water. Kelly lost his sunglasses, got all wet, captured the bird, brought it in. It was all wet and bedraggled. And I go to touch it, and the bird's not even moving. I don't see it breathing. I don't see it moving. I said, geez, Phil, I don't think so. I don't think we made it here. I said, well, let me just see. Let me get it out. So I get it out, and lo and behold, it's alive. It's alive, but it's paralyzed. It can't move. It had no muscle tone whatsoever. Its heart was beating okay. It was breathing adequately, although shallow. So long story short, what happened with this bird, what I think happened with this bird is that it developed Clostridium perfringens enterotoxemia, which is it's botulism.
Wow.
And botulism causes paralysis in birds.
Mm.
And so I've seen it in other birds in the past. And this is what I think happened with this bird, because lo and behold, it had this fetid, nasty stuff in its crop, which I found, and it was distended, and I've lavaged it out. I got it, that all cleaned out. I put it on supportive antibiotics, put it on what we call intraosseous fluids, because finding a vein is very hard in a bird to maintain a catheter. So I actually put a catheter into one of its bones and gave it intravenous fluids that way, intravenous antibiotics, supportive fluids, and lavage, antibiotics. And so the bird started to respond that evening. And so that was encouraging. And then little by little, every day, and we had the bird for 2 weeks, he did make a complete full recovery. And it was just amazing, because I thought this bird was gone. Mm-hmm. And everybody at the clinic, he stayed with us for 2 weeks, that my staff really got into the situation, and thought that this was something that they all contributed to. One of the girls, her dad was even catching fish for the bird, and this type of thing. And we did a release, and the release was awesome. And if we have just a moment, that Kelly came, my staff came, the reformer was even there. They had heard that I was going to do this. I put the bird out of the box. It ruffled its feathers, it preened itself a little bit, and then it flew off of the bank and out over the water. This is at the Connecticut River, near where it was found. Flew away about half a mile upstream, upriver, into a tree. A few minutes later, we thought that was it. A few minutes later, a bald eagle flies out of the tree. And I'm like, that's not the same bald eagle. It flew out of a different part. And then this bald eagle, which my staff had named Finnegan, flew out after that one. And they came back right over us and started circling right up above us. And in a moment after that, a third one came. And I couldn't have written, if I wanted to write a story about this, I couldn't have done it any better than what actually evolved that day. And it was absolutely wonderful.
God, yeah.
And I love the fact that all of my staff, was involved with the rehab component, and then had the gratification of watching him return to the wild.
That's just a purely beautiful.
And Kelly loved it too.
Wonderful story. Wonderful story.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much. This has been a great interview. It's been wonderful to talk to you and to hear these stories. I know you have a whole lot more.
I actually do. Too bad we have more time, but it's an honor and a pleasure to be here today.
Thanks to all of you for joining us today with Ron Svec and his wonderful stories and all of the great work that he has done with various people in the community. So many people know him through animals and the rehabilitation and coaching and the Iditarod. Great stories. Thanks for tuning in. Please do. We're a weekly show. We're also on Facebook if you want to catch some of our other shows. Also on BCTV, the BCTV site, which has a lot of wonderful shows as well that you can check out. So thank you. We'll see you next week.